Today, I have more energy, my skin looks better, I'm stronger, and I even lost 10 pounds. But this didn't happen because I tried harder, and it didn't happen because I found a magic supplement. It happened because I stopped guessing. After nearly 18 months postpartum of doing what I teach, eating well, moving my body consistently, I finally got data to build a plan that actually matched my body. Today, I'm walking you through how my nutrition and my workouts have shifted since I got my DEXA scan and my RMR results. And later, my husband Louben is joining me as we take a deep dive into those early postpartum days. If you're new here, I'm Sarah. I'm a personal trainer and nutrition and health coach who lost 65 pounds years ago and maintained that weight loss for over a decade until now. Going into postpartum, I wasn't starting from zero and I wasn't learning the basics, which is why it made the season so confusing and honestly humbling because I was doing everything right, but I still felt off. Now, going into this episode, I want to be really clear. My results that I share with you, that is not from a 1 month fix. That is just a few months unfolding that I have really started to work on myself. And today I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty details of the nutrition and of the workouts after I had my DEXA scan and my resting metabolic rate test. In the last episode, I shared my DEXA scan and resting metabolic rate test results. If you want those, I will link them below. Now, the resting metabolic rate test, that kind of set the foundation for which I built my nutrition plan around. That number gave me the baseline, so I wasn't under fueling or over fueling or guessing anymore. And it became an anchor for how I approach food moving forward. For me, having meals planned and mostly prepped has always helped significantly. Not because it's rigid, but because it takes the thinking out of every single meal. Let's just face it, I don't have the bandwidth to be thinking about, what's for dinner? What ingredients do I need? What do I need to do here? I just needed something that was super simple that I could focus on and just start to implement. So I actually went back to using my Strong.Bold.Healthy 21-day meal plan as a foundation. And what I did is I would take just like 1 day of the plan and I would make multiple servings of each meal or recipe and I would adjust it according to what I felt I needed that day or how I felt. Now, I had mentioned previously that vitamin D was on the lower range of things, so I made sure I was incorporating a lot of those foods that had vitamin D. But this wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about starting over. It was just structure with a lot of flexibility. Now, again, based on my resting metabolic rate results, I had a clear picture of what my body actually needs just to function on a daily basis. This is before workouts, before steps, before life starts lifing. And when I found out those test results, I knew that I needed to begin to track my food because what doesn't get measured often doesn't change. So, what I did, I tracked my food for the course of about 2.5 months. Now, we're going to take a deep dive into that first month. And I can tell you right off the bat that between my meal plan that I was following and the way that I was supplementing with it, I was averaging about 1,650 calories per day. This would fluctuate a little bit. There were days where it would go to like 1,450, and then other days where it would hit like 3,300. Now, that caloric intake matters because it helped me fuel my body in a way that supported my training, supported my recovery, and my energy without making me feel depleted. Along with that, I will say what's more important than just calories is what makes up those calories. And this brings me to fiber and protein. My fiber intake was super strong, but again, I was following my plant-based 21-day meal plan. So naturally, it's going to be a little bit higher in fiber. So I was getting anywhere between 30 to 50 grams of fiber per day. Now, the recommendation is about 25 grams per day. So I think I was doing a really great job in terms of hitting those fiber goals, which helps with digestion. It helped me stay more satiated throughout the day and just help stabilize blood sugar. I then shifted focus to protein. Now, my individual protein intake needs hit around 60 to 75 grams per day. And that's what I averaged over that first month of tracking my food. Now, if you want to know how to calculate your own protein needs, I can give you the formula. Just comment protein and I'll send it your way. These numbers matter because I realized that once I figured out my calories and my protein intake and my fiber intake, everything else just kind of started to align. And I no longer felt like I was in survival mode. And all of this kind of fed directly into my workouts. Now, after receiving my DEXA scan results, that really influenced my workout program. And I actually mentioned last time that I created a workout program called the Comeback Plan. And it's just so intentionally simple. It consists of 3 days of lifting per week. There's a lower body day, there's an upper body day, and there's a full body day. Every single workout included core work. Now, the lower body days, that focused heavily on hip and glute activation, but it also focused on a lot of single-sided work. And the reason I did that was because with my DEXA scan, it showed that my right leg had zero point 0.6 more pounds of muscle in it compared to my left. Now, that might sound insignificant, but those imbalances can add up. I have lived this lesson before. I actually had a larger imbalance years ago that led to sciatica. And I honestly was not interested in repeating that cycle again. So the goal here wasn't to push harder, but it was really to even things out to make sure that there was more balance in my body. Now, with the upper body days, that was a mix of some bigger movements and a lot of physical therapy style work. I had mentioned that I'd had an elevated rib, and it was really interesting getting the DEXA scan results because I noticed that my trunk, so my torso, I was carrying 1.5 pounds more muscle on my left side compared to my right. Now, if you load the right side of your body, your left side is engaged to stabilize. And I was doing that a lot, holding Ren on my right side. If I had her carrier, it was always on my right side. And what was happening, I was doing a lot of this and loading my right side, but working my left side, hence all of the muscle over there. But that also went to show me that that was probably creating an imbalance in my trunk and therefore is what like led to an elevated first rib. Going back to the upper body workout, a lot of this was focused on strengthening my core and then strengthening my trunk in the sense of making sure that things were more balanced because that matters postpartum between nursing, holding Ren, and just living life in a forward rounded position. My upper back and my core needed to lead these workouts. With that, I will say that regardless if I did a lower body workout or an upper body or full body workout, every single workout ended with Tabata style conditioning, which means that there were short bursts of movement or work and then it was followed by rest. So, for instance, I would do like a 20-second plank and then take 10 seconds of rest. And I would do that for about 5 minutes. Same thing on an air bike, on a Stairmaster, on a treadmill, whatever it was, just to help rebuild my endurance without burning myself out. And here's the part that made it all possible, and it has nothing to do with motivation. I had to get really honest about my time. I wanted space for meal prepping. for a new workout regimen, but something had to give. My mornings with Ren in the early postpartum days and even bleeding into like 18 months postpartum, they were slow, snuggled up, playing on the floor. While I loved that, I also knew that I needed movement and I needed sunlight. And that's where I would take morning walks or just get outside to get some vitamin D with her. And then I needed to have some really hard and real conversations with Louben, my husband, about our schedules. What I basically asked of him was to shift the amount of hours that we were with Ren each day. So typically I would take the mornings, he would take the nights, but my mornings were a lot longer than his nights. So we shifted things so that he would be caring for Ren an extra hour in the evening, which gave me an extra hour in the morning to train without rushing or feeling like I was behind before the day even started. Now, with that, I will say that I really had to look at my own habits around that time and how I was spending my time. And this brings me to something that I honestly did not want to look at: doom scrolling. After a long, exhausting day, the last thing I wanted to do was think. So I would honestly just disappear in my phone in the evenings. And when I kind of stepped back and I took a deeper look at that, I was spending anywhere from 5 to 7 hours per week on social media. And that's when I really realized that I could do so much more with that time. And that's what really influenced things to shift. Now, I didn't quit social media, but I did delete easy access to it from my phone, which added friction. And the more barriers to scrolling meant that I had more time or more space for meal prep, for movement, and actually taking care of myself so that I could be a better mother, so I could be a better wife, so I could pour from a full cup and not an empty one. None of this was perfect, but it was very intentional. And this brings me to talking about those early days of postpartum with Louben and what it felt like from his side, wanting to help, not always knowing how, and what that season taught us about support.
Hello, my love.
Thank you for joining me today. I think a lot of our viewers wanted to see you and get your perspective on those early postpartum days because I feel like a lot of fathers or partners don't know how to support the mother of their child in those postpartum days. I don't know, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, just having a little bit of medical background and just kind of having that knowledge that, it is a different period for, the ladies going through this, right? So I think just knowing a little bit about it, of course, I didn't know exactly the exact experience, but knowing that, this is something serious, is something different, that I felt like that was a little bit helpful going into it.
Yeah. And I think just to give the viewers a little bit of context, so you and I are very independent people, I would say. We are entrepreneurs. So I run my business, Strong.Bold.Healthy. And then you have Rep Key Fitness and Dodge Arrows, even. So running all of these businesses on top of me being pregnant, I worked up until the day that my contractions were so bad that I literally couldn't work. I was kind of bound to the bed, so to say. But I think something also that needs to be noted is that I went back to work 2 weeks postpartum. You don't know which you don't know. And I think we thought, being that we are very independent people, that we could handle having a baby like on our own and not really having help involved. And what our whole idea of like that early those early postpartum days was like, oh, we can handle this ourselves. We'll kind of trade off like duties and stuff like that on top of working. And I think we both know that that didn't quite work out as well as what we thought it would.
I mean, I think it's life. I mean, you have this plan, right? Then the reality happens. You just have to pivot and adjust. There is really no perfect plan. But yeah, I think we thought that, but no, we adapted, we overcome, and yeah.
So, with that, I kind of made a list of questions just to gain your insight a little bit because I don't even know that we've really discussed like the early postpartum days in like extreme detail. But what did you expect in the early postpartum period? Like, what did you expect that to look like for me? And how did that expectation actually compare to what unfolded?
It was a little bit of an unknown going into it, but I think a lot of it was just more okay, I know the baby most likely is not going to sleep well, which means you're not going to sleep well because you're feeding. Um, and also just how can I be there to support you and help out as you need.
And I think one thing that we had done was we kind of, I was nursing, but I had also, I think, told you early on, I'm like, I want you to learn how to be a single father so that all of the responsibility wasn't put on me. I would pump and I would, we gave Ren a bottle early on so that she would take that and not just get used to,
Mhm.
feeding from me. And I think that was super helpful. But with that, one thing I think that like our house is set up so that like we have our bedroom and then we had her bedroom and it had, a full bed in there. So it was like we would take turns getting sleep. One of us would get sleep, so to say, in like our bedroom while the other was like caring for her in her room. But how would you describe her like early days? I know everybody's baby is like different, but in terms of like her sleeping and all of that and just like everything that she was going through.
Yeah, I mean, the sleeping was just not good, right? She woke up frequently, just like any newborn. For her, she was small for her age. So, me personally, I was worried about her losing weight because most babies do lose weight after they're born. And because she was already smaller, so I wanted to make sure that, she was well fed. So, I wanted to be involved, like feeding her the bottles. I wanted that bonding opportunity. So I was glad that, you suggested the bottle feeding early, which I was a fan of. But yeah, she didn't sleep well. And I think part of it, maybe for both you and I, but definitely for me was, it's like, what do you do? Or are you supposed to pick them up when they're crying early on like that? Or are you not supposed to? Because I know some research says, they cannot self-soothe that early. So how do you feed them and not becomes to where this becomes so it becomes where they're conditioning you because she was just waking up not necessarily because she was hungry but because she got to the point where she knew if she cried we were going to be there to hold her and things like that, but she was not a great sleeper. I think a lot of it was just us figuring out the way as we went on.
Now, I will say with her also, she dealt with reflux, and we didn't know that initially. So there was like a lot of like, obviously every kid like spits up, but she was like upchucking a lot. And I think once we figured that out, that helped a little bit in terms of like we had some medication for her to help soothe that. But still, she was a very alert baby and constantly up. And I remember one night in particular, I remember getting up to change her diaper in the middle of the night. And for me personally, like, I just lost like all of this fluid at once. And I literally thought I was losing control of my body, not realizing that that's a normal thing that happens and that what women go through in those first few weeks postpartum. And I remember going into the bathroom with her, she's screaming, crying, and I had to like put her on the floor to make sure I was okay. And then I remember coming to get you because I'm like, I just can't, like, I'm at my wit's end here. And, it's scary to think about that when your kid is crying in the way that she did, and there's nothing that you can do or that you're doing to soothe her, and you're kind of, on the edge, so to say, it is scary to think about like the scenarios that can pan out from there, especially if you don't have a supportive partner. And thankfully, I did have you to come to and, wake you up and be like, I'm done. Like, I need you to take over. I don't know if you remember that night in particular. We have a picture of Ren because she just like wouldn't sleep. Do you remember that night?
Yeah, I remember. And I felt like maybe it was more than one night when, maybe I don't think more than two or three where you were just like, okay, I'm done. I just need like a break kind of thing. But I do remember that one particular night, the one where, I think I took her downstairs after trying to feed her. I think we went through some bottles and then eventually I got her to sleep on that little rocker thing. And then I found a Thanksgiving napkin, I think, that says thankful or something, and I put it over her forehead after she fell asleep. So I thought that was cute.
But yeah, those nights, I mean, they were there, and I don't remember exactly how many there were, but I do vividly remember that particular night. It was just super hard, and I was just kind of done. In that postpartum season, like what were the first things that you noticed that made you realize like I was struggling? Because I know that like you know this about me, like I have a hard time asking for help. But what would like did you notice there were signs that I was struggling? And if so, like what were those?
I think just the main thing was just like, losing your patience a little bit, or just that, you're a very strong-willed, you're a really strong person. Like you have great, especially through tough times. So just you, in a sense, tapping out at certain points. I just knew that obviously that was incredibly hard for you. You must have gone through a lot before getting to that point kind of thing. And that's something I've told you about a lot of times throughout our relationship is that just ask for help. I know a lot of people struggle with that, but I think, asking for help is one of the best thing you can do, not just in a relationship, but just in life. Like, ask for help. There are people there often that can help you, but they cannot read your mind. So communication is important.
Yeah, I remember one day in particular, like was one of those days where like she was just screaming for what felt like hours on end. And I think it was like the reflux that was bothering her. But I remember just laying in bed with her and you coming home and just being like, "How was your day?" And I just like broke down crying because I'm like there are no words to it. You don't know how to explain it. And in those moments, like you don't know what to ask for in terms of help. What would you say to those people who like, even if you ask for help, but you don't know what you need help with, like what would you say to them?
My opinion is I think, if you have a spouse who is around, hopefully you do, is just pawn off the baby on them because I think that also helps them to see what you go through, right? I think unfortunately, moms in particular tend to do the brunt a lot of the workload in the household. And and if the dad's not around necessarily because they're working a lot, they really never truly know what you're experiencing. They to them it's just like, okay, you have an infant, right? How hard could it be, kind of thing, right? But leave them with the baby for a few hours or even a day, and that way they can really see some of the stuff you personally go through because a lot of things in life we can't relate unless we go through them ourselves, and that's one of those things. I think just take a breather, just pawn off the baby on them, and that way you get a little break as well, and it'll help them understand a little bit better. That's one thing I feel like helped me was just seeing the struggle firsthand.
I can't remember a particular day, but was there a time that like it was just you and Ren where you felt like you were kind of like reaching your breaking point?
Yeah, I can't pinpoint the exact date, but there were times that I did feel like that where I'm sure maybe you went out for the weekend or something, or not like out, but just like maybe to your family or just go out to the grocery store. I can't remember, but I remember her being with me for a solid probably 3 to 6 hours kind of thing. And she was fussy, speeding up kind of thing. And just like I said, it really helped me understand or a little bit or relate to some of the stuff you go through when you do have the entire day.
And I think one thing that helped us was that, what, 3 months in, we actually searched for like a mother's helper because, and that took some time to find someone. So that's something I would totally tell someone to like get set up ahead of time, is to have someone who can help when like your spouse isn't around, in terms of like washing the bottles or sanitizing bottles, things like that. Like the small tedious things. I know for me, if I was like pumping, like washing those pump parts and things like that. It was just so much to do on top of taking care of a baby. And I
Yeah.
think that was one thing too, because I had gone back to work so early. I remember training, like virtually training a client, and Ren is screaming in the background because I think, you know, we had the assumption that, oh, she's just going to sleep throughout the day. That's what babies do. I remember like we were having a hard time in terms of communicating like schedule and being home at certain times and not assuming that, you know, I could just like handle it. I don't know. Do you remember or recall like those days in particular about how, you know, there was a struggle with like scheduling things and making sure we were showing up, like when we said we were going to show up?
Yeah, I think a little bit I remember. Sometimes, I would get caught up at work kind of thing. Maybe I said I was going to be home at, 5:06, and then, it's closer to like 8 o'clock or something.
Yeah, I think one of the things before we had a mother's helper, someone step in to help us with Ren, there was one time in particular, I remember you're like, oh, just bring her to me and I'll take her from there. But I think what you didn't understand at the time was packing up all of her things, getting her changed, getting her ready to like just get in the car was so much effort and so much work. And I remember calling you one day because she literally had like a blowout or something like that, like right before we
Mhm.
were about to leave. And it's like,
Mhm.
not only do you have to change a diaper, you have to change an outfit, you've got to wash her, like just so many layers to it all. And I think I remember calling you and being like, it's not happening, like, not coming. You need to come to me. And again, it's kind of those things you don't know until you're in it. But yeah, those days were hard. Now, with that, in terms of like how you've seen my journey kind of unfold, from your perspective, what is it like watching me try to stay consistent with like eating nutrient dense foods and working out, but like still there's this frustration of not feeling better. There's still like this depletion that I'm dealing with. Like what was it like from your perspective?
I just kind of observe it, I guess. I'm not quite sure, I guess, how to answer that question.
Because I think I would tell you a lot of the times that I was tired, and there's no like right or wrong answer here, but like I guess did you believe me? Next time, Louben and I are continuing the conversation about those early postpartum months. And I'm also going to take you into month 2 after I got my DEXA scan results and my RMR results, and what the nutrition and workouts looked like as they started to shift again and change as my body started to build momentum. And if you're a mom, just know that you matter too. Your energy matters, your strength matters, your mental, physical, emotional well being matter. Taking care of yourself is not selfish, it's foundational. And here, that's why we focus on nutrition, mindset, and movement, not as rules to follow, but as tools to help you move forward so that you can feel strong, bold, and healthy. I'll see you next time.